All right, here we go. Welcome in, Bleav in Commanders podcast. Scott Jackson and Anthony Armstrong with you, part of the Bleav Network. We are brought to you by FanDuel as we get ready for the Commanders and Lions. Anthony, the Commanders an 8.5-point underdog on FanDuel right now. And, of course, the big news for the Commanders this week has been the health of the team, Joe Whitt going to the sideline. And to talk about all that with us from Substack, the last man standing, he is Ben Standig with us. Ben, how you doing, buddy?
All right. A little bit stressful Friday that I'm attempting here, but all is well, Scott and Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Well, of course, Ben had to get in the car and start driving to Northwest Stadium when he found out the news that the President of the United States was going to be there Sunday, because that's how long it's going to take to get the media and everybody else through security. So that was a smart move on your part, Ben, just to go ahead and head on over to the stadium right now.
You think that's going to
You know what? You're joking, but you're not joking.
I feel like that's going to mess up the tailgating situation.
That's going to make it a little bit more challenging, 100%. All right, let's start with the quarterback news. Jayden Daniels, the elbow dislocation. There was some concern, obviously, that what they'd find when they went through all the testing, but it looks like, yeah, I mean, it's an ugly-looking injury, but it is the best-case scenario. And, of course, he's not on injured reserve, leaving out the possibility of him to play this year. What did you unearth today talking to Dan Quinn? What will it take for them to play him again this season?
So first off, like what Dan Quinn said was they will reassess things essentially, like kind of like after the bye, and we'll get an update then, which I don't, again, not a medical expert, not an expert really on anything, to be honest. But like my assumption is sort of like, they're not sure exactly like what the time frame is. They've left open the possibility, like you said, of him being able to come back in the next 4 games by not putting him on IR. But when Quinn said that, like, he'll give us an update and then he'll kind of advise what the plan is at that point, it says to me that he still could be out for longer than just that time period. I had a medical expert on my podcast the other day, Dr. Anu Navani, and she said, having seen nothing but the replay, that she was very optimistic that it would be not a big deal, i.e. no surgery, things like that. And then she put that as like a 1 to 2 month recovery period. So if you get past those first 4 games, they still have 4 games left, all the division games. Maybe he comes back in there, but that's going to be the question. And I guess I would almost want to know from you guys is, does it make sense if he is back for those games? Does it make sense to put him back in, knowing he's had all these injuries?
I mean, I lean on the side of saying, leave that man on the shelf, put it out the way, because you already messed up your toy one time because you tried to play with it too early. To me, I say leave him on the side. But then I had that question of, if they happen to strike lightning in the bottle, if they just happen to go on this miraculous run over these next few games, and you really are in a place to make a run, get into the playoffs, do you bring him back in, Scott? Like, I mean, that's something to consider. But there's one side of like, man, I mean, you found something that's working with the current setup, which is one of the first times you've had consistency and continuity all season. Why would you want to change it up then? Especially knowing that you got, guys kind of been battered and injured a few times. So I don't know, Scott, what would you do in that situation?
I think he needs to play if he's healthy. If they have people out there that are worth playing with too. I mean, that's the other thing, right? Is Terry McLaurin back? Is he going to – because you finally get to look at what your first team offense is supposed to look like for 4 games. Would that be the worst thing in the world to finish up the season? That might be kind of a throwaway season in the end. I just think you got to still find value out of this year. And to this point, let's be honest, there's not a lot of positive to draw from bringing Jayden Daniels into year 3. So I think you're trying to glean any positivity you can, any momentum, however you want to look at it. And here, to be the Grim Reaper here, you also got to find out if he can protect himself on the football field again. Because if he can't, then what are we doing here over these next couple seasons as this rookie contract continues to tick, right? Then is this somebody that you still feel like you did at the end of last year, 1,000%? Of course he's our franchise quarterback, stupid. Why would you dare ask such a crazy question? He's the guy. Of course he's got it all solved. But we've seen some evidence this year that even beyond the injuries, as Kurt Warner brought some of this to light this week and others have as well, that is something a little missing with his game this year beyond the health part of it. So, yeah, I think if he can get back healthy and you can see him and you got enough people around him that that will help him enhance his game. I would like to see it. I want to see some positivity going into what appears to be a no shot at a postseason kind of year. But anyway, that's me and Anthony. Ben, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm torn. I mean, the Jewish mother in me is always cautious and would be like, let's let it, like kind of what Anthony said, leave the sideline. He's had all these injuries, just, you know, have him ready for next year, go from there. But on the other hand, look, he has only played 6 games. This is only his second season. We treat him somewhat like he's a finished product, and obviously that's not the case. There has been some struggles. I actually talked to Kurt Warner this week after he publicly posted his own thoughts on it. And, he was like, hey, look, I'm watching the tape. I'm not worrying about the defense, what the defense is doing. I'm not really worrying about who's a receiver, but just watching what's at the tape, there seems to be some hesitation on his part. His eyes don't seem to be going where they need to be necessarily. And, that could be a variety of reasons, but reasons nonetheless. So I think to a degree it makes sense. And I will say that, this playing spoiler is kind of, whatever, but like the last 4 games are all against division opponents.
Sure.
So like to a degree, it's a little bit of a measuring stick scenario that you can sort of apply to this, right? It's not just a game. Again, I don't know that that's really a factor, but at least there's something there that you can say, hey, there's another reason why we want to see this, because we're going to, face these teams that we have to go up against every year. Let's see what we look like when we have, kind of all of our guys around. I mean, they do.
Yeah, you're talking about protecting yourself. You went up against Philly twice, and then with what they have with the New York Giants. So that's a hell of a discussion to have to go and figure out. Because I agree with what Curtis said. I looked way back just early in the year. There were situations where it's like, yeah, you had opportunities deeper over here, but it seems like he's trying to play the game in a different way. It's like he's trying to play the game like he did last year, where he was able to drop back and then sliver and work his way up through and then, run it or throw it. It's like, dude, people are on to that now. People are on to that. They're putting much faster linebackers on the field. I don't know if the VR isn't turned up as much or if it is, but looking at the tape of what's happening in the game, that's why I found that the Marcus Mariota, starts were important, because you could see him stay in the huddle and stay in the pocket just a little bit longer to process something. But nonetheless, with what they're rolling out, and with this matchup against Detroit, obviously Detroit's running hot. What do you think is their chances? What do they have to do? Obviously, roll out just a perfect performance, but what do you see them doing matching up with Detroit? And obviously, they're going to be coming in angry after a loss against Minnesota.
Well, my standard answer the last couple of games when being asked what do the Commanders kind of need to do to win is basically saying it doesn't matter. It matters what the other team is doing. When Kansas City came out and was stubbing their toe a bit in that first half, Washington had some opportunities, but it wasn't like Washington's defense was stopping Kansas City. The Chiefs had, Mahomes threw the one pick, and then the second one hit off of Kelsey's hands. Otherwise, they didn't punt until deep into the game, and in the second half, they woke up and kept scoring. Seattle just went straight for the jugular right off the bat, and Washington couldn't do anything about it. So I think for me, ultimately, look, Washington's got to be on its P's and Q's. You can't turn the ball over. You got to tackle, like all the fundamental stuff. But the fact we have to talk about the fundamental stuff is it kind of explains why they're in the position that they're in. So, look, Mariota, you can't rely on Mariota is passing the part of his game to like really lead the way. You've got to run the ball, control the clock, all those things. If you put him in a position where he has to throw, you're in trouble. But hey, look, they're playing a Detroit team last year that had 5 turnovers against Washington in the playoffs. They get lucky again with something along those lines. But that's kind of what I think it's going to have to take. And look, Detroit, they're coming off a loss. Detroit certainly remembers who they lost to in the playoffs last year. And they've got Jahmyr Gibbs and Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown and a bunch of other dudes, Sam Laporta, that are going to be a problem for Washington. So I don't know how the Commanders get this done based on their limited roster, but they need to, hope that Detroit doesn't come out full throttle. No car joke intended, and then take advantage of it.
I would have gone with Lions don't come out roaring, but I like what you did with the cars as well, because the Ford family. Let me ask you about the defensive news of the week, which was Joe Whitt leaving the booth to come on the sideline. I mean, well, hell, why not? Right at this point, why not put him out in the secondary if you have to? But what was, I guess, the big, I guess their big takeaway? What that's going to bring this defense that's going to suddenly make them not make all these not missed tackles, I should say, and not like have these blown coverages. I mean, what do they feel like that this is going to unearth with him down there on the field?
Well, look, I think one of the topics that's been there all year has been the communication in the secondary, right? Or just on the defense in general and how that's been a problem. And it feels like every game there's at least one or two moments where you're like, what just happened there? I think Joe Whitt said even on that play where Corey Horton ran right past Mikey Sanderstill for that 25-yard touchdown, that there wasn't communication issue on the Sanderstill part, but that there was communication issue elsewhere in the play. If the ball had gone in a different direction, it could have been a problem. So I think it's to help be there and help facilitate that more, to be able to discuss directly with the players what's going on rather than do it, the game of telephone or over the phone or what have you. Look, Joe Whitt said he asked to do this. He said players asked him to do this, so I don't deny any of that. It feels a little bit, though, like everybody knows they want something to happen, somebody to lose a job, get fired, change roles. And this is a way of saying, hey, we're not going to do any of that, but we want you to understand we're not asleep at the wheel. We get something is off, so we're going to do this. And it's not uncommon teams to do these kinds of things and see where we're at.
I mean, I think it's a good move just to find a way to shake things up and streamline communication, because there's definitely something that when you go from, over the phone talking to a coach and he's like, hey, what's going on with down there? You don't know the relationship of that whatever coach it is. Let's say it's a DB coach speaking to his DB. He may not deliver that same message the same way. So let's see it light up a little bit. I mean, I look back to Atlanta when they had gotten rid of their receiver coach. OC came down to the field. Things kind of lit up a little bit. So maybe we can get that on the defensive side, because we're going to need it. We're going to need a little help. Let's see. I did find one thing, that the Lions, when they lost, they didn't run the ball well. So what does Washington got to do to stop these suckers? Because that's one of my keys coming up, y'all. Stopping these run games, slowing Jahmyr Gibbs down, because, I mean, we know he's an electrifying player.
Well, last year in the playoffs, they were able to slow him down because Ben Johnson just stopped giving him the ball. So
right.
that would be great if they could do that again, because Jahmyr Gibbs might have had a 500 yards rushing in that game if they just kept giving the ball. Look, I mean, it's always an all hands on deck situation, but even more so now because there are so many injuries at defensive end. That's having to reshape where they're using certain players. They're using Frankie Louvu more down on the line. Jordan McGee's playing more, so having his speed and athleticism on the field is not a bad thing. But they're just going to have to be as stout as possible, and everybody's going to do stay with their role and be on their responsibilities, because as we know, one guy out of position could reshape the whole thing, and that's been part of the issue for them this year. Like I said, I'm just nervous about you can't cover everything, so to speak. And, like Sam Laporta is one of the better tight ends. If you get him matched up on one of the linebackers or even a safety, that has not gone well for Washington this year. So if you lean on that, now all of a sudden are you exposing the edge too much where Jahmyr Gibbs might want to run? And I haven't even mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown from the slot. Mikey Sanderstill has had an up and down year primarily in the slot. He's allowed more receiving yards than any slot corner in the league at this point. So there's just so many scary circumstances for them. But, if it starts, hey, focus on the run. They've just got to be stout on the edge, something they struggled with last year. They just don't have the big bodies right now, but they start with there and then, kind of work your way back.
Yeah. Ben Standig, Substack with Last Man Standing. You can follow him there. Again, the Kurt Warner interview is up right now. Among other things, the podcasts are there as well. You mentioned the secondary. This is the final one for me with obviously, Marshawn Lattimore out. Had a lot of fans want to run him off the team for a while. Now they got their wish. He's not going to be playing anymore. How do they cover with that? Does Sanderstill stay in the slot? Does he move outside? Is there any been discussion about that? How will they mix and match coverages on the other side of Amos?
Isn't it crazy with Lattimore? He arrives at the trade deadline hurt, and his last game was at the trade deadline because he's hurt. What a terrible bookend for that. Feel bad for him, but it's what they do. So it seems like the gist is that they've got Jonathan Jones and Mikey Sanders still. Either guy can play outside, either guy can play in the slot. I don't necessarily know that it's one is better than the other in that regard, but we'll see what they think. They also are probably going to play Noah Igbenogany after he was inactive the last couple games. What I think is the most interesting, and it's not about this game, it is about Mikey Sanders still, because last year he was forced to play outside more because their outside cornerbacks were terrible, just to be fair. And even after Lattimore came over in the trade, they still needed more help. So he stayed outside, and you know what? I mean, he's giving up a lot of inches to some receivers, but he fought, he battled, he's got good instincts. So this year he's got 3 interceptions. But is he an outside corner long term? They brought him in as a slot guy. They moved him back to the slot this year. They drafted Trey Amos because, they're viewing Sanders still as a slot guy. So do you move him back outside now because you need the outside, or do you leave him in the slot where, again, he's giving up more yards than any slot corner in the league? So it may not be that way. They just may be focused on winning this game. But for me, I'm like, hey, if they move him outside and don't leave him in the slot, that somewhat says to me they're not sure what he is. And if that's the case, then that's a very interesting thing going forward.
Yeah, I think about last year, he had an interception. I think he was playing outside more at that point against Detroit. So maybe they go back to some of that and have him on the outside. But definitely appreciate you joining us, Ben. Last Man Standing over there on Substack. Check it out. Subscribe. Give him a follow all over the place as well. Appreciate you, Ben. You have a good one.
Hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate the local security where I am here. I pulled up in some fancy housing development. I appreciate them letting me go for the last 15 minutes. So thanks to everybody.
Thanks, buddy. All right, thanks to Ben Standig for joining us here on the Bleav in Commanders podcast, part of the Bleav Network, brought to you by FanDuel. Of course, like, comment, and follow. We need that from you. We love the participation. All right, Anthony, give me a game script for a Commanders. Look, nothing should be surprising in the NFL, but let's be real. If the Commanders beat the Lions, I think some people are going to have jaws on the floor this weekend with the Lions coming off of a tough loss, with the Commanders without Jayden Daniels. It just feels like mission impossible almost. How do you kind of see it? What would give me a script for success for Washington?
Yeah, since we talking scripts, league-wide scripts, think about what's coming up in December for the NFC East. Hard Knocks. We need to have an interesting, juicy storyline going into Hard Knocks, so maybe Washington can find a way to not only cover the 8.5 over there at FanDuel, maybe get the W as well. I think that you got to find your way to steal a couple possessions and then just be very opportunistic. So this is one of those ones that Ben mentioned, 5 turnovers in that playoff game. Maybe something like that reoccurs again. Maybe something that jumps up there. Maybe you get some fire and excitement out of your new defensive players that are in new spots, and they make some things go their way. So this might be the full combination game that we're looking for, but the game script can just be one of those ones where the ball bounces in Washington's way for once. They're starting to, catch a little bit of fire heading into Thanksgiving and then into December. So to make the NFC North juicy and the NFC East juicy, that makes the most sense for the NFL. I mean, Vince McMahon would love it.
Yeah. I'd like to see the Commanders, we've talked about this a ton. I'm a broken record guy here. Get Chris Rodriguez some more touches, man. Love the way he ran late in that game. And I heard Cliff Kingsbury giving him credit this week when he did his presser. And, maybe that Bill's being a little impatient and not following where he's supposed to go. Maybe Bill needs to watch a little bit before he gets in the game and hit the team with the bulldozer early and then with the speed in later, like they did in the early part of the season. Just something that I would be interested to see. And I know with Mariota, they're going to try to play that tempo, which is great when you're getting first downs and moving the ball. Not so great if you're getting behind the chains. So they've got to stay in front of the chains this week. And we'll see if they can do that. But you nailed it with the turnover thing, and Ben said it too. I mean, there is an interesting thing, like Dan Quinn, even going back to Dallas and in Atlanta and other stops where he has faced Jared Goff. Jared Goff's had some struggles against some of his defenses of the past. Now, look, this defense is a mess right now. I mean, they're a mess. And it's truly not maybe Dan Quinn's defense as much as it is Joe Whitt's defense. But whoever's defense it is, they need to make Jared Goff uncomfortable and try to create some takeaways, as you say, the extra possessions to find a way to win this football game.
Yeah, I'd love to see a resurgence of the young fella, Jaylen Lane. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Shoot, you got yourself a big game. It's been a rough couple of weeks.
Yeah, it has been.
We got to be real about it. So the best way to get off the schneid is one, catch a pass, right? Get that first hit, and then maybe get back into that punt return end zone again. Love to see special teams
Right.
show up in this matchup. Make a way to really separate the game a bit. But talking about the keys of this matchup. All right, let's jump into those real fast. Number one, I put time of possession. Win the time of possession. History doesn't say that that's what you have to do to beat this team, but I specifically wrote down Christian Rodriguez. He's got to be one of the guys that gets to cover the rock. You talk about FanDuel. I think the over-under on him was like 20 and a half yards. It needs to be over. It needs to be well and above
Needs
over.
to be way over. Yeah.
Bill's over under was like 40 and a half. So I need those two people to switch.
Okay.
Bill can still get his over 40, but I really need Chris Rodriguez to lead the way. He needs to lead the way in carries, lead the way in setting the tone, stay ahead of the sticks, just like Scott was talking about. Find your way to third and short, because last year they were doing crazy good success on fourth down. They haven't had so much this year because they've been so damn far back. On that second key, Scott, the second key is on the defensive side. You got to find a way to bottle up Jahmyr Gibbs. All right, you got to find a way to bottle up Jahmyr Gibbs. I know this week Dan Quinn said we are going full speed 3 days a week. We're going all full speed practice. And that lets me know that he's going to let whoever shows up with the fundamentals is going to be able to play. So if you're not tackling in practice, we ain't going to wait Sunday to find out. So if there's somebody new back there, that means they've been playing with some energy. And look for Jeremy Reeves to make a play and get involved with this, because he's been really playing with his hair on fire. I know he wears a low cut, but you get what I'm saying, Scott. You get what I'm saying. And that third one, we mentioned it before, got to find a way to steal that possession. Got to find a way to steal a possession, get the ball in your hand one extra time, be efficient with it. But you're going to have to play a perfect matchup. We already know this simply because, hey, just the matchup isn't even right now. It's not even. So, you're going to have to play a perfect game. Here's the other part I forgot to mention. There's only 60 minutes in the football game. All right. And so you can only control what you could do inside that 60 minutes, but where you can control is what you do ahead of that matchup. This is what you do when you know you're going up against a Goliath in comparison to what you are. You can prepare more. You can prepare better. Watch an extra bit of film. Find one extra tip, one extra key that's going to get you one step ahead against Jared Goff in this offense, against this defense, Aiden Hutchinson in this defense. What's going to help you get the ball in the end zone and make your team that much better? The preparation ahead of time is going to be key. That's your extra key this week, Scott.
Ching. I like it. Again, 8.5 point dog for the Commanders. By the way, one of the team captain's name for this week's game is Chris Rodriguez. I don't believe in coincidences, Anthony. I don't believe in them. I think this could be something. So we'll find out what happens there. Hey, let's wrap this up before we go. This is an awful story not too far from your neck of the woods in Dallas with Marshawn Nealon's suicide this week. And just, I say this all the time, but just a reminder that no matter what people do in life, they may look like they're so successful, they're so happy, whatever. This guy just had a touchdown on Monday night, right? We just never know what's going on with a person. You just don't know what's happening. And, always good to check in on your people and make sure everybody's all right. But that was just an awful story. I feel so bad to hear something like that. Such a young man, but just awful. And you've lived in a locker room. I mean, I can't imagine how that team's dealing with that this week. And, they have a bye week. They're probably going to need it, just to kind of process what the heck just happened there.
Yeah, definitely heartbreaking. Prayers to his family, his girlfriend, and to the Cowboys, really. I mean, you take away the logo, like this is just a game, right? This is somebody's life and livelihood, and that is something serious. And I believe it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So ask for help. Reach out to a friend if you're thinking about them. If they cross your mind, just send a text message, pick up the phone and call. It doesn't hurt to do that. So just our thoughts to them, thoughts with the Cowboys organization as they handle this and handle that moment. But appreciate y'all tuning in and listening. This is Bleav in Commanders. That's Scott Jackson. I'm Anthony Armstrong. Y'all be safe.